Today we are going to talk about Fractal audio, and the experts of you may know that I own the Fractal audio FM9 and the AxeFx, and currently I'm playing the FM9, so here's the editor. And also I own most of the other modeling units on the market, the Cortex and the Headrush Prime. I don't own the Helix, but all the other ones, the budget-friendlier units like the Hotone Ampero II, Sonic Matribox, Valetons, Moors. And I was shooting videos with all of these units and also releasing preset packs with the best high gain tones ever. So if you're interested in getting one of these, please contact me in Facebook or Instagram. Links are in the description below. And please consider subscribing to my channel. But today I would like to show you what, in my opinion, are still features which are only available in the Fractal audio products. So the FM9 is a the floorboard version of the AxeFx. Comes with a little bit less CPU power, and also some features are not available here, which are available in the AxeFx. For example, the I guess the tone match function. It's basically their attempt to clone amps. It's working, and I use it a lot, but yeah, you can only do it with the AxeFx, so not with the FM9. And I was talking a lot about the user interface recently, which is pretty poor on the Fractal audio products, and it's way better in the Headrush Prime, for example, but there are, of course, some things which are still only available in the Fractal audio products. And I don't discuss the overall amp sound quality and effects quality, which is, in my opinion, still unmatched. There is maybe the Cortex, which comes close or is maybe similar as far as the quality goes, the feel of the amp simulations, but other than that, it's Fractal audio is still leading. But one thing which is clearly, which should clearly be addressed, is the flexibility of the amp controls. So let's start with that. Here you have the amp section, and in the amp block itself you have 4 channels. So you can load up to 4 amps within one block, and then use one of these 4 amps in the scene. So you can switch amps using one block from scene to scene. You have the sheer number of amps, ridiculous, 328 currently. And but what I would like to show you is the amounts of of knobs and switches you have here in the amp block. So it starts with this page, which is a tone control. You may know that from most of your amps, your bass, middle, treble presets. This amp has a bright switch. They vary from amp model to amp model. For example, the Mesa amps, they have 2 gain controls here, at least the Mark series amps. And you have the IDEO page, which also features the controls, bass, middle, treble presets, but also some more, like a special high treble control. So let me show you what that does. Affecting other frequencies than the presets and then the treble. So every amp comes with these. A bright cap. You have this headroom here. Very helpful. And of course lots of knobs which I still don't know what they're doing exactly. So the bright cap would be one of them. Master volume trim. I don't know what that is. Input trim is basically you can raise the volume of the incoming signal, in this case the guitar signal. And as you can see, I raised it because this guitar, the Harley Benton Fusion is a little bit weak as far as the pickups go. So they don't sound bad, but the output is not very high. And you have a boost knob, which brings me to the next page of the amp block. If you engage it, you can assign in the input boost section what the boost should do. So it goes from just a neutral overall signal boost to some of the pedals here. Of course, you have a drive block here in the unit where you can access 1000 pedals, no 69, but and also adjust these with graphic EQ's advanced parameters here. But even in the amp block itself, you can have access to some pedals out of the list, so the most famous ones, I guess. And they do what they do, but you have only the boost level control here, and this saturation and drive and switch. You can switch them, for example, to ideal, saturation. I don't know if that is working with the input boost. I guess it's more of a preamp adjustment here. And you have a low cut and a high cut even in the preamps, so that can be used to reduce flubbiness. For example, if you set it pretty high, like in modern angle amps, it immediately gets tighter. You lose maybe some bass, but you can add it afterwards here with the bass control, for example. And also with the depth control, of course. I think I applied a high cut here, low cut here. No, I didn't. Yeah. So you have all these preamp adjustments, and also, of course, the tube hardness, tri-plate frequencies, everything you may know if you're an expert with analog gear. And what you can also do is you can change the tone stack here. For example, this amp, the Atomica High, is more or less, from what I understand, a modified Marshall, but you can use it also with, let's say, maybe a 6505 tone stack. Where do we have it? Here. And suddenly it sounds more like a 6505, and as you can see here also these things, they're changing the values. Also you can shift it around, which makes a huge effect. Of course, only if you use the EQ. For example, if you use the mid EQ here, boost it. It's affecting different mid-range frequencies. And of course, you can also switch it to pre. Then, if you switch it to pre, then you have the tone stack here of the amp is located before the distortion stage, like in the Mesa Mark amps, and then basically you can use this section to act like a glorified boost section, not for the overall tone control. So let's go back to the initial state, and that is still the preamp section of the amp. You have also the power amp section, of course, where you can adjust everything you can imagine, like the negative feedback and presence at depth frequencies. Here you have a page just for the power tubes. You can choose from different EL34s in this case, but of course you could also run this model using 6R6s. Actually, that sounds pretty nice. Subtle differences. To be honest, I didn't play around with that because the unit itself, it sounds so good even at stock settings. Okay, power supply is also one thing which I didn't touch, but I'm sure you can do some fancy things with that. Maybe here I used this before with the older AxeFx models. So this reminds me of the sag parameter. It adds some, well, lower mids, but also the feeling is more, it's very different. You have to try that out. You have the speaker section, which is not the speaker itself, the speaker block. Instead, these are the, well, the adjustments you can make to the speaker response of the amp. And as you can see here, there's an impedance curve selected that comes with the now it says auto dynamic cap impulse. Okay, don't know exactly what that is, but here if you choose this, then you can use other impedance curves. For example, they say 800, and these things also affect the sound very much, especially if you use some completely different and speaker breakup, fancy things like that. And you have the dynamics here. Let's skip the input-output EQ for a second, which is also mentionable, worth mentioning. The input dynamics, which is something, if you crank it, then the amp is reacting way more to your how strong you pick. As here, I think it's compressing way more. So that is something which I still didn't find in any other modeler. And so you can make the amp more dynamic than the actual model would be. And last but not least, you also have an input and output EQ section in the amp block, which is very powerful. And I can't remember I can't remember any unit which has this, or at least in that range. In the Headrush Prime, you have also a 3-band parametric EQ in every block, which is also very helpful. But here you have in the amp block, for example, you have the input EQ with 1 band where you can maybe boost some frequencies. By the way, input EQ, it means it's located before the signal hits the preamp. And you can shape the guitar signal here. You can also cut the highs, which many people like. You can also cut the lows, which is also something many people like to do. And you can also add some definition. And you have the output section, which is basically an EQ which you can shift around to the input before the power amp or at the output of the amp block. And that's basically you have a graphic EQ to shape the overall tone. And you can choose from different EQs here. So as you can see, everything which you can access in the, I think in the graphic EQ block, 3-band, 5-band, 7-band, 8-band with a variable Q and a constant Q. I prefer the variable Q because it's a logarithmic scale here. So these 200, 400 hertz, but here you have 3K, 6K. And Therefore the EQ should change, in my opinion. And of course, depending on the characteristic of the amp you're using, or maybe the 8-band, 5-band or 7-band EQ works more or better than others. And the reason is they access different frequencies here, of course. So as you can see here, you have the 250 Hz, 500 Hz, and in the 7-band EQ you have the 200 and 400 Hz. So very flexible. What is also really unique in that unit, it's flexibility regarding the controls. So of course you can control scenes. We have up to 8 scenes here, and every block can contain 4 instances of the category. The block is 4. So for example, here you can have about 4 different phaser settings or phaser modules in the block. But you can also control these knobs. For example, here the 400 Hz, using some of these controllers here, and that could be pedals, controllers which are controlled by pedals, but it could also be, for example, a pitch follower. So if you set it to this, maybe the higher the pitch of the note is, well, the more the fader goes up. So for example, here you can set the minimum range to 0, and then the maximum range to maybe something here. And then you can see suddenly, if I play a higher note, it goes up. And if I play a lower note, then it stays. So more or less a pitch sensitive EQ now. Thickens up the tone when I'm playing higher notes in a solo. It doesn't do anything if I'm playing lower notes. So that is very flexible, as you can imagine. And everywhere you can find these yellow points here, well, you can connect some controllers. And also you can connect LFO controllers, for example, which I do sometimes in the wah block. So you can see here, it's moving, and this is moving the wah control. So as if you are moving the foot constantly. Basically like an auto wah. But you can also change, of course, here the logarithmics, how it is moving and from where to where. If you want to do that. So the overall controllability of the unit, it's outstanding in my opinion. And then we come to the cap section, which is another thing which, well, I would like to point out. You have tons of IRs that come with the unit. So if I choose the picker here, for example, well, 1004 here, 1024. Okay, then the user wants start. So shitload of IRs, but it also comes nowadays with an emulation. So if you're choosing Dynacap, for example, you can use the cap emulation and mic emulation here, like maybe you know from other modeling units where you can move the microphone around, and that makes it also very intuitive to use. If you like that. They don't have that many microphones here, as you can see. but maybe there will come more in the future. I don't know, actually know if there are more in the AxeFx III, but at least here in the FM9 you have only the 4 mics. But anyway, it's a very powerful section, and here in the conventional section, which they call Legacy nowadays, you have also the low and the high cut. You can change the slope for the low and the high cut. You can pan it. And also what is really nice is if you use more than one cap simultaneously, you can reduce the overall volume here of one cap. Or turn it off. Okay, here I'm using one of my own IRs, which is a little bit more quiet than the other ones. But usually when you're using 2 IRs here and you reduce the volume of one, the overall volume is not affected. And that is what you want, I think. If you reduce the level here, you want that this is more prominent than this. So you can change it here, but the overall volume is staying the same. And that is very helpful to level out everything. So a very sophisticated unit in my opinion. And still I didn't talk about the pure well, number of effects and also well, the quality of effects. So I was just focusing on the amp block in this video and also on the cap section. But the other ones are also very sophisticated. As you can see here, for example, the complex delay or plex delay as it is called. It has a shitload of parameters. Also here the delay, depending on which you are using, you can choose from these different delay types. For example, if you are using the where is it, the 2290? It was the first one, I think. First one in that row. Then instantly you have some of the settings or parameters of the real unit. And you can adjust these so they are going to maybe the settings which the unit would use. And also you have these things like repeat, stack, hold. Then the delay doesn't end. Things like that. So you find these only in the Fractal audio units, I think, at least in that amount of well, parameters. And of course you have everything which you can imagine, every effect, at least which I can imagine. So if you like to tweak some of your effects or your amps and you don't want to, well, you're not the guy who's working mostly with amp clones and replications of analog gear. Instead you want to tweak your modeling unit, your digital unit to perfection, then this would be the way to go, because the other units are not that flexible. Even the quad Cortex doesn't have the flexibility of this unit regarding amp tweaking and effects tweaking, and also controllability, I think. There is a little bit of a downside regarding the foot switches here. The built-in foot switches, there are 9, and you can also use different layouts. For example, for presets, you can change presets, but I'm using other layouts which I defined. One for scene switching, one for just effects. But still I couldn't find out how to set them to momentary mode. That just as long as you leave your foot on the flanger pedal, it's affected, and then if you release it, then it's disengaged. So couldn't do it here. Maybe I didn't find out the correct way to do it. It was very easy to do this with the Headrush Prime, but other than that, a very flexible unit, very good sounding, and yeah, now I'm quite curious what Line 6 will deliver with their new Helix Stadium, which they announced. So I don't know. I wonder if it can compete with the flexibility of this unit. So that's it for today. Hope to see you. Adios.